And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis. Next to me, as always, my beautiful co-host Laraib, as we're here to break down an exciting week 2 of NFL football. Laraib, so many crazy upsets this week. I mean, all these big favorites going down, and just so much to talk about from what we thought was a pretty underwhelming slate of football. But the NFL always is able to surprise us with some awesome games. Laraib, how are we feeling about this week?
Yeah, I got to eat my words from our last predictions episode. I thought this was going to be a very mild week. But a lot of these teams, 6 point, 7 point underdogs, just came to play, Lewis. And with all these upsets, we still didn't pick one correct in our picks. Let's go ahead and pull this up for you guys here. And, just an awful week from the both of us, compared to last week. But with all those upsets, of course, the big one, this one for me was the Vikings beating the San Francisco 49ers. And that was kind of the difference between a tie and another win for you here, Lewis. So congratulations on your 2-0 start.
Yeah, I thought I was pretty ballsy going with the Browns over the Jaguars in Jacksonville, but that defense pulled it out, so I felt pretty solid about that pick. Besides that, I mean, yeah, a lot of whiffs on this board, and even some of the games we got correct came down to the wire. So just super excited. We both picked Arizona, which was a pick 'em entering kickoff, and man, did they look impressive. But just a lot to get into this week, and I take a commanding 2-0 lead. And what they say is teams with a 2-0 lead. Well, we'll get into that later. Laurent, let's go ahead and start with last night's action. The Atlanta Falcons steal a win in Philadelphia from the Eagles, barely eking it out. Kirk Cousins with a vintage Kirk Cousins drive late in the game with a touchdown to secure the win over Philadelphia. We both picked Philly in this matchup, and for the most part, they looked pretty solid, but then just fell apart in key situations all throughout the game. I mean, so many fourth down conversions that where you're just shaking your head, and other times when it's a fourth and manageable, and they punt or they kick, and it's just like, what's the strategy here? It made no sense. Their strategy, in these critical in these critical conditions. And I throw that all on the head coach, Nick Sirianni. I mean, he looked completely flustered coaching this game. It just seemed like he made the wrong decision each and every time. And Laraab, let's not forget with this Eagles team. They're a team that's lost 7 out of their last 9 games, including a humiliating playoff loss to Tampa Bay. And, they beat the Packers in Brazil in a really weird, flag-filled, just weird environment. Jordan Love gets injured in the last play of the game. Obviously, that didn't influence the game. And then for this game at home opener against a Falcons team, which we were both throwing up major red flags over Kirk Cousins and how good he looked. This offense was really shaky. For them to pull out that win from under the Eagles, it feels like whatever happened at the end of last season might be carrying over into this season, Laurent. So what were your thoughts about the game last night?
I think steal is the proper word that you use right there, Lewis. The Falcons came in and stole this game from the Eagles. You can blame it on Saquon Barkley for dropping that ball. You can blame it on Nick Sirianni for, throwing it on third down. But it all comes down to that defense. That secondary just was playing way too soft with a minute 40 left for Kirk Cousins, and he was dicing it up. And so, you go back to that last Falcon drive. Quinyon Mitchell is guarding Darnell Mooney. He tackles him inbound on their first deep out route, and their inbounds, the clock is ticking. All right, then they do the same thing again. They're going after Quinyon Mitchell, the rookie, and then he misses a tackle on Darnell Mooney. He gets out of bounds, and they're at like the 30-yard line. And that's when I started shaking my boots. And I mean, Cooper DeJean had to come in on a couple plays towards the end of that. And so it's been that Eagles secondary, Lewis. We talked about it last year, and it's continuing this year, even on that opener, like you mentioned with the Packers. Jordan Love was just tossing it deep to Jaden Reed and Christian Watson. And so just a huge blunder from what a team that could have been 2-0, now 1-1, having to travel to your New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, and we kind of thought something was up. The secondary did not look good at the end of last season at all. Then they go in the draft, they get 2 corners, and they bring in a safety. I'm blanking on his name right now, but they really put an emphasis on rebuilding the secondary, and 2 rookie corners against a veteran quarterback like Kirk Cousins in those moments is just not going to bear fruit for this Eagles defense. And I honestly was more shocked about this run defense, Rob. You'd think the strength of this defense would be Jordan Davis up front, would be, Nakobe Dean and some of these interior defensive linemen. But they really just were getting gassed last night by Bijan and Tyler Algier, and games where it's like, hey, Kirk Cousins still a little sketchy. We really need to play the run, and they just were getting gashed. We even saw in the game against the Packers, Packers were able to run the ball pretty well. So it just, this defense overall, you bring in Vic Fangio in the offseason, and there were, disputes. There's a reason why he left Miami. He's getting older. Does he still have his fastball from when he was this elite defensive coordinator? And just with the personnel, I just do not see it. And, obviously no AJ Brown for this game. It looks like he can miss a few weeks on the offensive side. And this offensive line really was kind of shaky. They didn't run the ball as well as they could. Now, credit to the Falcons defense and what's it? Not D'Amico Ryans, the head coach. I'm blanking on his
Raheem
name right now.
Morris.
Raheem Morris. Credit to his scheme and the players that they added. They have a solid defense, but to not be able to run the ball when that's kind of your bread and butter, especially when you're missing a guy like AJ Brown on the outside, was very startling to me. Eagles let this game get away with them. Coaching, defense, a lot of big question marks for this Eagles team, Laraib.
Yeah, and I mean, this was a huge loss for them because now you're 1-1, you're tied with the Cowboys, and when you could have had an extra game on them, division is going to be really tight. Now I know a lot of people, like people say, not a repeat division winner, but when you're dropping games like this at home in your home opener against the Falcon squad, which really hasn't been impressive so far this season, is just a really bad look. And it could have gone either way on that Saquon Barkley catch, but no, that's just what the NFL is. You're going to have drops. You're going to have, bad play calls, and you're just going to have to live with it for the rest of the season, Lewis.
Yeah, and before we move on, I want to credit the Falcons and especially Kirk Cousins. We were really, just throwing the dirt on him after last week, just like he's cooked, he's done for. And for him to have that final drive, they have the pieces offensively, and they were running the ball very well. That if they just put it together and Kirk Cousins looks like, even 90% of the Kirk Cousins we saw last year before the injury, then this team could be very dangerous. After that just really upsetting week one for Falcons fans, for them to bounce back on the road is a huge thing for them. Now going to Kansas City on Sunday Night Football next week. If they would have lost this game, you're looking at 0-3, and that is just a rough start. But credit to the Falcons for getting this win. And of course, the Falcons had to win as a Saints fan. But let's go ahead, Laraib. Let's go on to our meat and potatoes discussion for this episode, where we're talking about, week two. It's easy to overreact early in the season, but when you're 0-2, the numbers are pretty startling for playoff chances, Laraib. We were talking about it beforehand. Since 2021, when they expanded the playoffs to 7 teams versus 6 teams, and they expanded the season to 17 games, you'd think there's more opportunity for teams that start off slow to build their way back up and make the playoffs. But Laraib, since 2021, only 3 teams who have started at 0-2 have made their way to the playoffs. And 2 of those is just because the division was bad and they found a way to win the division. But now you're looking at a lot of 0-2 teams, a lot of shocking 0-2 teams. So I want to start with you. What are some of the 0-2 teams that really are hitting the panic button right now, in your opinion?
The biggest one that I have circled on my board, Lewis, is the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, you pay a boatload of money to Trevor Lawrence this offseason. You draft Brian Thomas Jr., who's played very well. You bring in Gabe Davis, and you bring in, ETN and Tank Bigsby in the backfield, and you're thinking, all right, we have an offense here. And they just weren't able to get anything going in that first half of that game. And then in the red zone, it was abysmal what Trevor Lawrence was doing down there. I mean, he's had full protection in the pocket. He's just scrambling around like a chicken with his head cut off. They're in, the 2-yard line, and you can't punch it in on 4 plays. And I mean, on 3 plays, and then you're settling for 3. I mean, I think Doug Peterson, we won't talk about the Raiders this episode, but Antonio Pierce, who I had circled as an early, head coach to be fired candidate, I think that has moved for me to Doug Peterson and just the job that he's been doing terribly over there in Jacksonville.
I mean, Laraib, let's face it, Trevor Lawrence looks like he's regressing. Do you know the last time the Jaguars won a game?
It's been almost a full year. I think it was last Thanksgiving week.
Thanksgiving week. That was week 11 of last year. That was the last time the Jaguars have won a football game. And now, 7 losses in a row with Trevor Lawrence. We had the excuses last year. He was injured. He was working through things. Now a fully healthy offseason, with new receivers, Brian Thomas, Gabe Davis. Obviously, maybe you could argue a little bit of step down from what he had in previous years. But you figure, Shad Khan, the owner, came out in this offseason and said, I expect this team to win. I want this isn't a rebuilding year. Let's figure it all out. No, he said this is one of the best Jaguars teams he's ever watched in the preseason. And now you come off to this really, really, shoddy start for the Jaguars. And Trevor Lawrence just looked really bad. I mean, only like less than 200 yards passing, just really shaky at home. I mean, no, he had 220 yards, excuse me, but just indecisive plays. He looks very startled in the pocket. And you could say, oh, that's just, a Browns defense. But we saw the Cowboys dominate this Browns defense just a week ago. And there's gaps to make. And just all over Doug Peterson, yes, I agree with you. He is on the biggest hot seat in the NFL. And Laraib, I just wanted to throw out this Jaguars schedule coming up. Next 2 games at Buffalo, Monday Night Football, and then at Houston. I mean, you are staring a really treacherous start right down in the face right now. And an 0-4 Jaguars team, especially with how good, we've seen the Houston play so far, and just this AFC in general, it's so tight that you are basically dead in the water. Despite the 0-2 stats we've already named, this is a rough start for Jacksonville, Laraib.
And what I want to point out, one spark of hope this team has is their defense. You go back to last week or 2 weeks ago when they faced the Dolphins in Miami, they held that team to 20 points, Lewis, and one 80-yard Tyreek Hill bomb away from only holding them less than 15 points. And then in this one, your defense is the only reason you're in that game. You're keeping it so close, and then you're giving a ball back to your offense who just can't do that much with it at all. I think, there's a chance. Obviously, every team in this, some of these teams in this 0-2 column have a chance of turning it around. And I think they are, maybe third best in doing that because of that defense. But if Trevor Lawrence doesn't get back on track, the most highly touted prospect, number 1 overall pick of all time, is due for some trouble, Lewis.
Yeah, well, Laura, I want to mention another 0-2 team that I really have my red flashing lights saying, danger, danger, you could be in for a really bad time, and that is the Los Angeles Rams, Laura, a team that we were both pretty high on. I barely had them missing the playoffs, but not because they were an inept team. I just think they had a tough schedule, and this is just a tough season for them, Laura. But the injuries are just killing this team right now. I mean, you want to just focus on the offensive side of the ball. Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, they're the 2 biggest highlights for this offense are just, they're at least going to miss 4 weeks each. I mean, possibly more. And then offensive line injuries are just brutal. You lose your first string and second string left tackle. You lose your right tackle, and you lose a lot of guard depth as well. So Matt Stafford is just getting slammed. And we saw last week they got destroyed by the Arizona Cardinals, and it just wasn't remotely close. This offense could not get out of its own way. And the path forward is treacherous, Laura. They host the 49ers next week, and we know how the 49ers travel to Los Angeles. That is going to be packed with red and gold jerseys. And then you have some buffer games. You have the Packers, maybe no Jordan Love in that game, the Raiders, the Vikings. But, I mean, are we just digging ourselves too big of a hole? And how can we get these guys healthy? I feel like this has been a problem for the Rams, is they'll have a good season and then follow it up with injury mayhem. And then a good season and then injury mayhem. And now I'm starting to wonder, Laura, no protection, no receiving threats. Matt Stafford is in a really, really tough position here. And if he gets injured, the season is over.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. Matt Stafford has sustained, a couple of bad injuries in his career. And like you mentioned, with all those guys out, they made that Cardinals defense, Lewis, look competent last weekend. And so I just a really tough path for them going forward. And I think, at this point, I'm penciling them out of the playoffs, especially when the Cardinals look so good on offense. The Seahawks are 2-0. And even with the 49ers at 1-1, we know, like you said, they're just going to march into town and handle business. And so the Rams, the panic meter is really high on that team.
Yeah, and then one other team I wanted to just shout out for the wrong reasons in this subject is the Indianapolis Colts, Laura. Just to the first game against the Texans, you can say that's a tough divisional game. You blew it, but then to go to Green Bay and you don't have your, the Green Bay Packers don't have Jordan Love. They're playing Malik Willis, a quarterback, a guy. When we picked this game, we were like, we are strictly picking this because we do not believe in Malik Willis at all. And the defensive scheme from Gus Bradley, the defense coordinator, was just laughable. I mean, how are you letting them run all up and down the field when Malik Willis has never been able to prove he is a reliable passer of the football? He did not throw a ball more than 15 plus yards once in this entire ball game. Yet we're playing these deep quarters coverage and allowing over 150 rushing yards again 2 weeks in a row. It's just mind-boggling to me. Gus Bradley and his scheme, and we really don't like Gus Bradley that much. He hasn't been good since that Jacksonville defense all the way in 2017. His schemes are outdated, and just teams are pounding this Colts front with a rush, and it just does not seem like it's going to get any better. And then you flip it over to Anthony Richardson. He's just a mixed bag. He's a super raw quarterback, and you're just going to get the highs from him, these crazy 60-yard bombs where his arm looks electric. But then you get the lows of he can't take the layups. He can't make the checkdowns, the basic plays. Guys who have succeeded the most in our lifetime, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, Patrick Mahomes, these guys have been able to take the easy ones. Take what the defense gives you. Don't try to be a hero all the time. And that led to 3 interceptions in short fields for the Packers. And I mean, just very alarming from this Colts team.
Yeah, I mentioned it last week. Just raw is the main word when it comes to your mind when you think about Anthony Richardson. You said he had 3, should have been 4. Quay Walker, just drops one that hits him right in the face mask. And like you mentioned as well, that rush defense. If teams know they're going to pound the ball, guess what the game plan is going to be? They're going to pound the freaking ball on you. And so just really questionable coaching. I think, this is another season for the Colts where they're just thinking Anthony Richardson in his first full season, they can just consider this his rookie year. And they're just going to have to learn through those growing pains. Like you mentioned, they have to figure out, Anthony Richardson has to learn how to take what the defense is giving him. And until he learns how to do that, it's going to be a very long road for him.
Yeah, and I want to pivot down to 2 0-2 teams that we feel more confident just based off the pedigree of these teams, the pedigree of their quarterbacks, and the division that they're in. And that's the Ravens and the Bengals, Laura. Despite falling 0-2, both these teams, ironically, have just nail-biting losses to the best team in football, the Kansas City Chiefs. And then their other loss is a what the hell just happened against a team that they were projected to destroy. In both cases, the Ravens losing to the Raiders this past week, and then last week, the Bengals losing to the Patriots at home, where it's like, what are we doing with these teams? But you just trust the pedigree of these organizations. I have a little bit more faith in the Bengals just because of the schedule coming up is a lot more favorable for them. Whereas the Ravens are just go head first into a gauntlet. They needed that Raiders win to feel good about themselves. But you just trust that these 2 teams are going to be able to bounce back. Which of these 2 teams would you trust more, Laraib?
I'm going to also agree with you on this one and go with the Bengals. Their trajectory, Lewis, from week 1 to week 2 is going up, right? You lose a really bad game at home, and then you should have won that stinking game against the Chiefs, but that's neither here nor there. But you can see how, Joe Burrow's improvement. I was talking about how he's, wasn't able to grip that water bottle on the sideline, and he came in this game and he was slinging the rock. I mean, respectfully. And then you see the Ravens, nail biter against the Chiefs, and then you just blow a huge lead at home to the Raiders. I mean, completely asinine from John Harbaugh. He's had a couple of stinkers, Lewis, where they've been up huge in a couple of these games the past, 4 or 5 seasons, and they just find a way to lose. And so we thought, they're bringing Derrick Henry and that power run game would really step up this week, but just wasn't there. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Lewis, we talked about in our week 1 preview, just the depth that they lost on that side of the ball. And now starting to show, right? Brock Bowers comes in, he just dices up the middle of the field with, no Patrick Queen there. You look at the secondary, Devontae Adams carves them up, after they lose Geno Stone. And so it's just going to be, and the schedule, like you said, is also going to be hard. Meanwhile, the Bengals have a couple easy games coming up. And so the path, we've seen this Bengals team go 0-2 and make the playoffs.
Right.
3 years ago, they've done that. And so you just got to lean Bengals in this one, but this is the AFC North. Anything can happen in this division.
Right. And you still have T. Higgins coming back soon for the Bengals to really revitalize that offense, even though I really liked what I saw from Yoshivas as a good third receiver stepping in for that Tyler Boyd role. And then looking at the Bengals schedules, 4 out of their next 5 games are against the Commanders, the Panthers, the Giants, and the Browns. So you have winnable games to start building up your resume and feeling good about yourself. So I think we agree right there on the Bengals, Laraib. But let's go ahead and look at some 2-0 teams. Now, you mentioned to me teams that start 2-0 have a almost 75% chance to make the playoffs with a hot start. And, it's not as big. It's only 2 games. And sometimes teams just, you play 2 crappy teams to start the season and you're feeling good about yourself. And then reality hits you like a truck, Laraib. But I want to ask you, out of the 2-0 teams that we have in the NFL right now, who are some of the teams that you're probably the most skeptical of with a hot start?
There's a couple ones that really stick out, Lewis, like the Vikings and the Steelers. But I'm just going to go ahead and start off right now with the Houston Texans, who a lot of people are saying are Super Bowl contenders, who looked really, really good on the defensive side of the ball on Sunday Night Football, but only put up 19 points in that game against a strong Bears defense. You go back to week 1, they play a really tight game on the road against the Colts, who just got decimated by the Packers with Malik Willis. And so you look at their wins, not the most impressive things. And, CJ Stroud is top 5 easily quarterback in the NFL, but they have a plethora of weapons. But I just didn't see them doing anything remarkable in that Sunday night game against that Browns defense. And when you're in those heavy hitter games against the Chiefs, against the Bills, who do I trust more in those situations? Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. And then, I just feel there's something I can't put a specific thing on it. Something's just telling me that, they just aren't going to be at that upper echelon this year.
Yeah, I couldn't disagree with you more on that one, Laraib. I think when it comes to in belief and being able to make the Super Bowl, the first step is winning your division and making the playoffs. And Laraib, the rest of the teams in their division are 0-2, and we highlighted 2 of those teams in our blanking alarms. These teams should be panicking section. I think they have an easy road to a division title. And you said they haven't looked too impressive, but CJ Stroud, as you mentioned, is a top 5 quarterback. He's going to find ways to win games for them. And I've been impressed with their defense. And I think that Sunday night game was honestly, they had a failed 4th down conversion on the 1-yard line. They just had some things like kind of fail in their way, fumbles here and there. And that Bears defense, give them credit. They are a good unit. But now, they have a division win at Indianapolis, probably their hardest divisional game, maybe at Jacksonville. But just going through the rest of the season, I have faith in this Texans team. I have faith in CJ Stroud that they're going to maintain this chokehold they have in their division. And the step to the Super Bowl, Rob, is getting that home playoff game, and you go from there. And you let the other AFC teams just bludgeon each other. So I really have faith in the Texans. I'm kind of surprised by your answer. My answer here is actually going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I love this defense, don't get me wrong. And Mike Tomlin, he just always finds a way. But there's nothing really about this team that makes me think that they can compete with the heavyweights of the AFC in the long run. Now they're 2-0. They're leading their division. No other team is 2-0 in that division. We mentioned the 2 teams that we thought, we still have hope for. The Ravens and the Bengals are 0-2. I'm still going to say I have more faith in those 2 teams over the Steelers just based off quarterback play, Laura. And if the Steelers, if a team could get to 20 points against the Steelers, I don't have faith in this team. Like the offensive line, just the penalties last week. And this Broncos defense was really causing them, just havoc on that offensive line. So when they face some of these upper echelon teams in the AFC, I just don't have the faith in this offense. Arthur Smith, Justin Fields just doesn't feel like a winning combination for me long term. Shout out to them. I think their defense is going to win them a lot of games against inferior opponents. But against these top line quarterbacks in the AFC, I just don't have the confidence. I'm looking at another 10-7 first round exit for this Steelers team, Rob.
10-7, Lewis. I think that makes the playoffs in the AFC this year.
First round exit.
Hey, playoffs are the playoffs. Mike Tomlin, let's keep that positive streak going. But no, I have to agree with you. Their defense is, I said the Jets are
outstanding.
The best
I think it's the best defense in the NFL.
And yeah, I have to agree with you. It's the Steelers. What TJ Watt, when he's on the field, I think there's no doubt in our minds that he is the best player in football behind Patrick Mahomes. He can just wreck a game on every single play. You got to double team, you got to triple team him. But like you mentioned, on the offensive side of the ball, Justin Fields, how much can you really believe in him to push the ball down the field when they really need to? Like you said, if the other team is scoring 20 points, it's really tough. Now, Chris Boswell, he's got a heck of a leg, and they've been utilizing him a lot. But to win in this league, you got to score touchdowns, not field goals. And so, not completely out on them yet. But we'll see when Russell Wilson gets healthy. Maybe they can add another level to this offense.
Yeah, and then some other teams I wanted to highlight in this section. Your Seattle Seahawks 2-0 leading the NFC West. Really striking game against the Patriots, going into overtime. Patriots, throw some respect on their name. They're a solid team. They're a well-coached team, good defense. But for what I'm seeing from the Seahawks, it's just, can we reach that higher level of offense? And, you lose Kenneth Walker to an oblique injury. He should be back, though. The rushing game really hasn't been that strong. But I need to see more from Geno, this new offensive system that they're implementing. It's just a lot of new right now. And I'm very impressed with this defense, even though they allowed the Patriots to really run all over them. But maybe that's just the Patriots way. Byron Murphy, stud. He's starting to become one of our guys, Laraib. I'll throw that out there. And I like the secondary. I like what Mike McDonald is doing with this defense. But it's just that higher echelon of offensive ceiling I'm not stealing with the Seahawks yet. And in that division, I've seen that with the 49ers. I'm seeing that with the Cardinals, and it won't be easy games against the Rams later down. Those are always tough games for Seattle. So just sustaining this level of play is going to be tough for me, Laraib.
I'm going to give you a little pushback on that, Lewis. I really like what I saw out of Geno, 300 passing yards, no turnovers. And when they needed him to drive down in the fourth quarter to kick the game-winning field goal, he did that. And what I really like about Ryan Grubb and, the new offensive coordinator versus Shane Waldron is getting your playmakers the ball. DK Metcalf over 10 targets, JSN over 10 targets. Those are the guys we want to get the ball to versus Shane Waldron trying, design his run, pass offense. We have the best the top 3 receiving core trio wide receivers in the league, and you want to get those guys the ball in space, and that's exactly what Ryan Grubb is doing. Now, Kenneth Walker goes for 100 yards last week, and then he's out with oblique, and Zach Charbonnet came in, and he just did his job. He had a touchdown. He pounded the ball in when we needed to. And so I really like what I saw, especially from last week, from this offensive line, where you gave up 2 safeties and you were just getting manhandled on the inside. I think they've really stepped up this week against a sneaky good Patriots defense, and we'll continue to see what they do on the season. But I really like just getting the ball to our playmakers.
Yeah, Laraib. And then, you talked about your Seahawks. I think everyone's been waiting for this segment. The New Orleans Saints are 2-0, Laraib, and I am in complete shock. I don't know what to think about this team. I think it's a fair assessment to say the Saints are the best team so far of 2024 out of every single NFL team. Just the impressiveness of how this team has looked. 15 straight scoring drives with Derek Carr's quarterback to start this NFL season. And I'm just sitting here watching it. Oh, another touchdown. Oh, another touchdown. To go into Dallas, a team that is historically great at home despite the home playoff loss last year. Just bringing in Clint Kubiak, this offensive coordinator, is just revitalized this offense. We saw this, you mentioned going from Shane Waldron to Ryan Grubb, going from Pete Carmichael to Clint Kubiak's, like going from a busted forward focus to a Aventador. I mean, we're talking different ballparks here in innovation, the motion, the play action pass, all the run design is just, this is modern NFL football. Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay offense that, going into last year with the Saints, my optimism was, Derek Carr, he's a good quarterback and he's put up good numbers before, but he's never had that elite defense. And he has a really good defense in New Orleans. But last year, it was the play calling, the run game, the offensive line that was just really holding him back in that old school West Coast offensive system that Pete Carmichael ran. But now you go to a more innovative, modern system that plays to Derek Carr's strengths. Run first, sets up the play action, sets up those deep bombs to Rashid Shaheed that just stretches the defense. And this offense is just blowing my mind. I don't know what to think right now. It's like, okay, you beat Carolina, you beat the brakes off them, they're a bad team, whatever. But then you go into Dallas and do the exact same thing. I'm just sitting here like, if there's any question I have about this team, I want to see them face a legitimate running offense because I don't think that side of the defense has really been tested yet. And I want to see them with some adversity now. We've been able to strike first. We have not been trailing a second so far in these first two NFL games. So I want to see, Derek Carr under some pressure where he has to throw the ball, where he can't run the ball. These situations, but so far, I am just over the moon with this Saints team, Laraib.
Yeah, and the biggest thing that's been standing out to me, Lewis, has been that offensive line. We talked about it with David Storm. That offensive line was ranked 32nd by PFF, and they have kept Derek Carr clean for the most part in these first two games. Maybe not that big of a deal against Carolina, but when we talk about the Cowboys with Micah Parsons coming in at that outside linebacker position, they really kind of just shut him down in that big time spot. And so, like you mentioned, with this quick game on the passing, great establishing the run. The ceiling is the limit for this Saints team. Now, for you guys, the Bucks are also 2-0, and they have also looked fantastic. And so I'm really excited to see how this NFC South plays out. But from what you see in the red zone zombie in his second year with the Saints, I think the narrative has turned upside down.
Yeah, I just want to I don't know what to think, Larav. This is just it's too much for me right now. I'm seeing Stephen A. Smith saying he thinks the Saints are the best team in the NFC, and I'm like short circuiting. I don't know what to think. But yeah, I want to see it again, like I said, against a good rushing team. I want to see some adversity. But right now, ESPN projections, Saints have the highest percentage in the entire conference to make the playoffs because at Dallas, arguably your toughest game on the schedule. Now you still have to go to Kansas City, and you mentioned it. We play Philly at home, then at Atlanta, at Kansas City, and then home for Tampa. That is the stretch of the season because if you win these two games and then lose four in a row, then, hey, remember that fun stretch at the beginning of the season? But if you're a legitimate team, you take care of some of these games, and then it is smooth sailing with some of the games left on your schedule, Rob. So I am an optimistic Saints fan. Would you believe that? But are there any other 2-0 teams that you just want to bring up in this segment, Rob?
My Chargers are 2-0 with the Jim Harbaugh at the head coach position, Lewis, and they have done it by running the damn ball. Finally, Justin Herbert gets some help besides having to throw it 50 times a game. And now they're 2-0, maybe not against the greatest competition in the world, but they are 2-0, and they are starting to build a culture in Los Angeles. I think the Rams, they've dominated the last couple of years in SoFi Stadium, but now there's a new head coach in town with a new culture with this is Chargers is another team who've been really banged up the past couple of seasons, and now fortune has favored them. They're staying on the East Coast, so they're playing against the Steelers, 2-0 teams. That is going to be a huge test for what this defense and offense are going to be capable of. But I really like the Chargers, what they're doing this season.
The only thing that I want to push back with the Chargers is there's still those damn Chiefs in that division, Laura. And if you want to come out, we want me to be able to believe in you, you need to topple the big bad wolf in that division. And that's Jim Harbaugh's specialty. Beating Ohio State when he was with Michigan, beating Pete Carroll and the Seahawks when he got to San Francisco, beating Pete Carroll and USC when he was at Stanford. This is Jim Harbaugh's identity. He sets up the culture, run the ball, physical defense, bring in Greg Roman, they establish that running game, which, hey, maybe the Ravens should run the ball more, but whatever. And just really establishing that identity, like you mentioned. I still can't quite believe in it yet. Justin Herbert with the plantar injury, this receiving core leaves a lot to be desired. Shout out Quentin Johnston, though, revitalizing his career. Maybe Jim Harbaugh gave him a good boom, boom on his shoulder pads before the game. But I like what I see so far, Larob. I'm impressed with the defense. Now, can you go to Pittsburgh and get a win? That will be a huge test for them and a really exciting game that we'll highlight in our next episode, Larob. But let's go ahead and move on to a final subject before our Thursday Night Football review, and that is the news that Bryce Young was benched in Carolina after 2 extremely disappointing weeks to start the season. And we really haven't seen great football from Bryce Young in any of his 18 starts since he's been named the starter in Carolina. Now Andy Dalton will be taking over the reins. Just what are your first thoughts when you saw the news yesterday?
I was shocked. I mean, Dave Canales came out this offseason and said, Bryce Young is going to be our guy. Bryce Young is going to be our guy. And what I really think happened here, Lewis, is David freaking Tepper said, pull that little munchkin out of the lineup and throw in Andy Dalton. David
Well,
Tepper.
Laraib, after the game on Sunday, Dave Canales, he was asked, is Bryce Young still going to be the starter? And he said, Bryce Young is our guy. So, yeah, I agree with you.
I mean, David Tepper, the worst owner in the NFL, I think, in his very short tenure with the Carolina Panthers. And now you're just throwing this team into disarray, right? Now, Andy Dalton, he's going to come in there. He's going to throw for 300 yards when they're down 20 points against some random team. But I think this really just cements it that Bryce Young's career at this point, I'm going to call it, it is over. And now,
I mean, his career as a Panther is over. I think we can agree on that. I'm not ready to write Bryce Young off, but let's keep it a spade a spade. This isn't a man. He was just completely failed by the organization. Laura, Bryce Young has not shown anything, and I mean any flashes, any special, anything that we can really build on. And it's hard to pull player from the system, player from the team, the situation. But in this instance, it's yes. Was he failed by the Panthers? You can't argue he wasn't, But has he shown anything for the Panthers? Like right now, the Panthers organization, why? I don't understand benching him, because what, you want to compete this season? You really want Andy Dalton to try to win you 4 or 5 games this season and just get a worse draft pick in a decent quarterback draft? If the move is to move off Bryce Young, why not grow the sample size as large as possible? Unless you think he is completely damaged goods at this point. And then to, maybe as a trade chip or something down the line, because clearly he's not the future in Carolina. Now, can Bryce Young have a Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield-esque route through the NFL where he goes to a really good team, maybe like a Kansas City, San Francisco, sits behind a established starter for a year, and then gets another opportunity? That's possible, because he's been thrown in the worst of worst situations. He might just need some time to develop, put on some muscle, and just figure out an NFL offense. But as of right now, I'm, whether it be now or at the end of the season, it was time to move on. It's just shocking to me this early on in the season. It's not like you have some other young guy you drafted this year that you want to give a shot to, like a Matt Corral or something. You're going to a 36-year-old Andy Dalton, who we know what he is at this point in his career. He's a high-level backup who is going to put up good numbers and losses, and he's never going to be the reason why you win a game. So I'm totally shocked by this decision. And it's hard not to harken back to that draft day trade. Panthers move up with the Bears for the #1 overall pick. And look where the Bears are at now. I mean, Caleb Williams, shaky start, no doubt about it. But to give up DJ Moore, to give up these draft picks, which the draft picks aren't even done yet. Now, they had their first round pick this year, but I mean, it just a colossal organizational failure by the Panthers. And David Tepper is cementing himself as the worst owner in probably all of professional sports.
No, this team is going to be rebuilding for a long stinking time. Even if they, get the #1 overall pick this year and they bring in a guy, they don't have a culture in place. They don't have a great system in place. There's nothing there for anybody to succeed. And now Bryce Young, see, look, I'm not a huge college football guy. I don't watch any college football, not much at all. And every single year we have, yes, this #1 overall guy. He's gonna be the greatest prospect since XYZ. We saw Andrew Luck. We saw Trevor Lawrence. We saw it with Zach Wilson coming in. We saw every single year we see these top 3 or 4 picks at the quarterback position.
Andrew Luck was pretty good.
I mean, he was solid for a time. I'll give you that.
Okay.
But some of these guys just come out and they are not good at football. They are in the system at Alabama. They're in a system at LSU. They're in a system somewhere at Ohio State, and they just don't really pan out in the NFL. And this is just another one of those guys to add to that list. And, you look at Bryce Young's frame, he kind of reminds you, Kyler Murray, the undersized guy, doesn't have that much muscle on him. And you think, all right, he's just going to add another element with his legs. We just have not seen that. I think Bryce Young, he really equated himself to a Drew Brees type, someone who's undersized and can't really move around that well, but he's just not that accurate of a passer. And so, I mean, just another guy that I'm really out on, wasn't really in on him to begin with when you're talking about him coming out of the draft from that Alabama system. And so, I mean,
well, hey, Alabama quarterbacks, yeesh, like Tua dealing with his own, obviously we're not talking about that in this episode, but really scary just further concussion stuff with him, health things. Mac Jones sitting on the bench in Jacksonville, and Jalen Hurts just hasn't looked like the Jalen Hurts in 2022 in the past 2 years. So maybe Alabama's the problem, Laura. And you bring up a good point with just quarterback scouting. And let's just look at the young quarterbacks in the league. Anthony Richardson, Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, these guys who are starting day one, thrown into the fire, are just getting eaten by the wolves right now. And the only guy, CJ Stroud, who kind of just breaks the mold, is, I mean, he's just phenomenal. So it just seems like such a gamble for these quarterbacks, and it's just a lot more misses than hits. But you look at the best quarterbacks. Tom Brady sat behind for a year. Patrick Mahomes sat for a year. Drew Brees sat for a year. Some of these guys just need time to develop. And look at the best quarterbacks in the NFL right now. Who's playing the best? Baker Mayfield, downtrodden and forgotten by his original franchise. Same with Sam Darnold. Same with Derek Carr.
Geno Smith.
Geno Smith, exactly. So many of these guys, they needed time to develop, to understand NFL defenses, to sit behind, established veteran quarterbacks. This is the hardest position in all of football, maybe corner, but NFL quarterback, the most pressure is on you, the highest stakes, and it only takes the elite of the elite. Like, not even Mahomes, started his rookie season. And Joe Burrow injured his rookie season. He basically had a year to, sit behind and watch NFL defense. So you look at guys like Michael Penix and JJ McCarthy and Drake May, guys who are being kind of patiently brought up. Those guys might end up being the best of the class. So how we evaluate quarterbacks and the process of bringing them along into these franchises, I just think teams need to be a lot more patient. But these are NFL businesses, the fans want to see the new shiny toy, but it can end up really hurting you in the long-term future, Laura.
Yeah, like you said, CJ Stroud kind of made it worse for everybody else, right? And he comes in, wins a playoff game his rookie year, and then, puts up a good fight against the Ravens. And now he's kind of like the standard now, if you think about it, for rookie quarterbacks coming in. And I'm telling you right now, no one in the next 5 to 10 years, okay, maybe in the next 5 years, is going to be able to live up to that kind of performance until we see baby Gronk come out of college and really light up that
Arch Manning. Shout out Arch.
Yeah, I mean, Arch Manning, I got a bone to pick with him, but
that's for another discussion.
That's for a couple years down the road, Lewis. But let's go ahead and get into Thursday night football, Lewis. We got another great one here. We have the New York Patriots traveling to New York to play the Jets. The
New England Patriots.
The New England Patriots playing the New York Jets. -6.5, the Jets at home. Lewis, Aaron Rodgers picks up his first win as a Jet last week against the Titans in what was a really close game. Now at home, who do you got?
See, as much as I love to pick the Patriots here, because if you ask me which team has just looked better in their first two starts, it's unequivocally the Patriots. I mean, the defense, which, they lost Matt Judon, Christian Barmore out with blood clots. Just they lost a lot of talent on that defensive front. And it was like, dang, man, like, how are they going to be able to hold water in this offense? The offensive line shaky, not great receivers. Jacoby Brissett, a quarterback, a limited quarterback, and even he would admit that. But they just have such a structure there, and it's weird because it seemed like last year the Patriots were just falling all out. But if you remember, they started the season very well last year. At least they started the season competitive. They had that first game against the Eagles that came down to the final drive. And this is just the Patriots' way. We'll get these tough games early. And if there's any team the Patriots don't mess around with, it is the New York Jets. Now, the Jets obviously have the more talent defensively. Offensively, they have playmakers all across the board. And Aaron Rodgers, he had some very impressive throws in that game against the Titans last week, Laraib. The throw he had to my boy Bryce Hall in the back of the end zone was just beautiful. And he still has the arm talent. No one questions that. It's just the mobility. It's the consistency to do it on a down-by-down basis, which, maybe he's just shaking off some of the rust and needs to figure it out more. And they need to, but how about that rookie running back, Braylon Allen? He looks very impressive, just stealing all of Bryce Hall's touchdowns. But, fantasy aside, another just added element to this, Jets offensive game, which just allows them to be a lot more versatile. I'm going with the Jets here. It's at home. I still like the Jets defense. I think they had a solid performance against the Titans, but Will Levis did a little too much for my comfort. But you're facing a Patriots offense, which has been able to run the ball very well. And if there's any formula for beating this Jets team, we saw the 49ers just run it down Robert Sala's throat in that Monday night game in the opening weekend. So the formula is there for the Patriots, but I just have to trust the Jets' talent in this one, Laraib.
I think Aaron Rodgers in his second primetime game of the season is really going to start to air it out. You know, Mike Williams got worked in a little bit Monday Night Football week 1, a little bit more last week, and now I think he's going to be pretty well ramped up in this one. Him and Garrett Wilson are going to provide 2 great targets for Aaron Rodgers, and we saw Geno Smith throw for 300 and some. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to try to have one of those type of games where he lets the NFL know that he's back. But like you mentioned, Ramondre Stevenson said, "We will not go silently into the night." And Gerard Mayo, you know, he was part of that Bill Belichick system, and they still have that culture there. So you know, they're gonna want to win this one too. But I just think the Jets at home, Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, like you said, there's a 1-2 back punch. Braylon Allen scored 2 more tutties in this one. Give me the Jets 24-17 at home.
So you have the Jets covering. I do not. I do like the Jets in this one to win, but I think it's gonna be a low scoring, just divisional rough it out game between 2 AFC East teams. So I am gonna go with the Jets, but I'm going Jets 20 to Patriots 17 in a very competitive game. Which if I had some bigger cojones, I would love to pick the Patriots here. But there's a lot of tasty upsets upcoming in this week, and we will get to those picks and all of the rest of the week 3 schedule, which is looking to be a awesome week of football coming up. So stay tuned to our Thursday episode for all of our picks, Laraib. But anything else you want to say before we head out of here?
No, I think that's the First and Goal podcast signing off.
Peace.